Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 27th of August of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the massive missile strike that the Russians conducted during the previous night. As a result of attack, the Russians destroyed few more energy facilities, objects, few more warehouses and so on. But in comparison with the massive missile strike that took place, let's say yesterday, on the night between 25th and the 26th of August, this time the Russians used less missiles and less drones. Anyway, if we compare these two missile strikes, this night the Russians were using three hypersonic missiles, Kinzhal, and the Ukrainians haven't managed to bring down even a single one. As for the 26th, from the 25th on the 26th of August, the Russians used three Kinzhals as well, but the previous time the Ukrainians managed to destroy at least one. So we see that just one day left and the Ukrainians has much worse situation with their air defense system. As for the results of attack, during the previous missile strike, the Russians mainly were attacking the southern part of Ukraine and the central part of Ukraine. And we have additional map of the blackouts. Right in front of your screens, you can see a map of controlled blackouts in Ukraine. The numbers are the numbers of hours without electricity. As you can see, as a result of attacks, the power plants were damaged, so it was decided by the Ukrainian Energy Office, Energy Company, and the Ukrenergo to introduce power outages in the regions. As you can see, according to this map, the Kiev region, Chernigov area, Zhytomyr area suffered most of all because the Ukrainians were there without electricity for around 12 hours. Now let's move to the situation on the ground, and we got a lot of very interesting and very important updates. And first we're going to talk about the South Donetsk direction. As you can see, according to this map, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the stronghold that located on the road between on the intersections of road between Ugledar and Konstantinovka, Solotka and Vodyane. In this video you can see a Russian flag that was raised in the most southwestern part of this stronghold. Just yesterday we got another video from the Russian sources, but the previous video was geolocated in this point, and based on this video yesterday we adjusted the map and added additional control to Russian territory that just in the most southwestern part of the stronghold. But today we have colored the entire stronghold under complete Russian control. So from now on the real battle for Vodyane and Ugledar has begun, because the Russians captured the most important stronghold on the road TO-524. As for Paraskovyevka, Konstantinovka, there are very heavy clashes. Today the Ukrainians published another video how they were repelling Russian attack, but this time the Russians were attacking on the line of Konstantinovka, Paraskovyevka and the Garden Association Shakhtar. Currently we don't know for sure whether the Russians managed to enter to capture some territories, but most likely something like this happened. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Konstantinovka direction. During the previous 24-48 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the fields between Georgievka, Marinka and Krasnogorovka. The Russians conducted a full-scale offensive operations towards the stronghold between the fields. For these purposes, the Russians were using significant number of armored vehicles and tanks. The Ukrainians of 46th Brigade were trying to slow down the Russians and to stop them, and as you can see, as a result of Ukraine counterattacks, they managed to destroy few vehicles. But one of the episode was geolocated exactly in this point, which give us let's say idea which give us to think that the Russians captured all these fields, tree lines, and got as close as possible to the main part of the stronghold. If you ask my opinion, I believe that the Russians managed to capture everything and the Ukrainians were forced to fall back further in the western direction towards the village by the name of Ostraya. This is the village I'm talking about. The Ukrainians don't have possibilities to move to Krasnogorovka or to Maximilianovka. The only way they can evacuate and withdraw their position is the village of Khostre. Now let's move further, and we are coming to the most important and the most interesting direction. We are talking about the Pokrovsk direction. So let's start step by step, and first we're going to talk about Karlovka. If you remember, just yesterday we have adjusted the map based on the video that was published by the Ukrainian sources. Give me a second. and not on the 25th, it was on the 24th of August. Yes, based on this video we have adjusted the map in the vicinity of Karlovka, and in this video we can see how the Russians were attacking the Ukrainian positions and how they were entering the village of Karlovka, but the Russian personnel carriers were damaged and destroyed as a result of maybe drone attacks or something like this. And today we got additional video, and in this video we can see the same place, the same area, and we see that another few more personal carriers entered the village of Karlovka, and on this screen, on this episode, you can see two personal carriers that were destroyed on the 24th of August. So the Russians entered the territory, they tried to establish electronic warfare equipment, but the Ukrainians brought the drones and they destroyed few more vehicles of armored forces of Russian Federation. Anyway, some of the episodes were geolocated along this line, and based on that, these geolocations, we have adjusted the map and added additional territory under complete Russian control. So from now on, the Russians control more than 50% of Karlovka, and they're moving further in the western direction. Now let's talk about the southern Pokrovsk direction, or Selidovo-Ukrainsk direction. First of all, according to information we have, according to pro-Ukrainian mappers, Deep State, the Russians managed to establish complete control for over more than 50% of the village of Kalinovo. So we see that Ukrainians show no resistance, they're retreating, they're withdrawing their positions and moving as far as possible in the southern direction. But the problem is that the Russians during the previous night managed to improve their positions significantly and to achieve another important goal. The Russians entered the village of Memrik that is located on the Ukrainian side of M30 road. It was unexpected. Obviously, I didn't expect that the Russians are able to cross the M30 road without any resistance from the Ukrainian side, but today pro-Ukrainian mappers confirmed this information. Obviously, the situation for the Ukrainians in this direction become critical. Now let's talk about Selidovo. Also, according to different updates, according to pro-Ukrainian mappers, the Russians managed to enter the village of Mikhailovka. Just yesterday we were talking about very heavy clashes in the vicinity of the coal mine, and we got the video how the Ukrainians were trying to counterattack the Russians that established their foothold inside of the industrial zone in the vicinity of the landfill, and the Ukrainians were using tanks for these purposes, but the Ukrainians were defeated and they lost armored vehicles. And now we have report that the Russians didn't stop, and they haven't been stopped by the Ukrainians, and the Russians even moved further and they captured the first street of the village of Mikhailovka. As for the village of Mikhailovka, as you can see, there are no borders between this village and the city of Selidovo, which means that this is one big Selidovo agglomeration. And today on the 27th of August we can make a conclusion that the battle for Selidovo agglomeration has started. Now let's move to Novogrodovka. As you can see, we have a lot of icons for the 27th of August, and according to different mappers, including pro-Ukrainian mappers, according to neutral mappers, and according to pro-Russian mappers, we can make a conclusion that the Russians established control for over more than 80% of the city. The Ukrainians currently control just the most northwestern part, including these two landfills in the Terikons, and the Ukrainians control the landfill that is already located outside of the city of Novogrodovka. Novogrodovka was captured almost completely. As you can see, the Russians secured more than 80%, and most likely today or the day after, and obviously by the end of this week, the Russians will be able to establish complete control over the city, and they will continue moving further in the western direction. We are moving the Ukrainian defense forces further deep inside of the territory of Ukraine. Furthermore, according to different mappers, the Russians entered the village of Mikhailovka to the north of Krasnoyar. And if this information is correct, then we can make a conclusion that the battle for Mirnograd has started, because currently there are no more cities between or villages between the edge Russian positions and Pokrovsk agglomeration itself. So I'm not sure for how long this battle is going to take place, but obviously this is going to be the fastest battle ever since the beginning of the special military operation. Now let's let's move to the Taretsk agglomeration, and today we got additional updates. We have some changes on the ground. The deep state pro-Ukraine mappers confirmed that the Russians established complete control over the Terikon of Pivnichne, but the most important updates are coming from the forces of 150th Mechanized Brigade. Due to the critical situation in this direction, the Ukrainians redeployed 150th Mechanized Brigade to the Taretsk agglomeration with the purpose to stabilize the situation, and probably they've been fighting with the Russians for the previous 2 or 3 weeks, and now they began making videos asking for help and begging for help of Ukrainian commanders. Furthermore, for the first time, the Ukrainian soldiers were asking not the military authorities, not the military commanders, they were asking civilian lawyers. They were asking lawyers to help them. They reported about significant number of illegal things that Ukrainian commanders conducted with their forces, with their brigades, with these awful and terrible orders they've been receiving for the previous few days. They refused to follow everything, and now they are begging lawyers, Ukrainian lawyers, to help them, to get them out from this hell and not to be blamed as let's say traitors or something like this. Furthermore, the forces of 150th Brigade confirmed that the Russians during the previous days managed to create several cauldrons, and an unknown number of Ukrainian forces have been encircled by the Russians. Now let's move further, and we are going to the northern direction. We have lots of very interesting updates. Since the beginning of the morning, the Ukrainian sources were reported that they launched another offensive operation in the Belgorod direction, and that first the Ukrainian sources were saying that a very big number of forces entered the village of Nikhatevka. They reported that there were around 8 armored vehicles and up to 60 soldiers. The attack started around 8 a.m. of the local time, and that according to the Ukrainians there are very heavy clashes right now. Later, pro-Russian sources reported that there are no clashes inside of Nikhatevka, but the Ukrainians were attacking the village of Zhuravlyovka, and the Ukrainians were using up to 200 soldiers and significant number of vehicles. The Russians reported that by the noon time of the 27th of August they managed to repel every single attack. But as for the current situation, it's better to wait for additional updates, because when we were talking about the Kursk offensive operation, the commander-in-chief of Armored Forces of Russian Federation reported that there were just 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers, and now we see significant progress of the Ukrainians. Yes, the Ukrainians were stopped, but obviously not by the 1,000 soldiers. They managed to capture all these territories. Now let's talk about the Kursk direction. During the previous night, we got a lot of videos from the Russian sources how they were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions, including HIMARS systems. For example, in this video we can see a Ukrainian radar that was destroyed as a result of Iskander strike by the Armored Forces of Russian Federation. Maybe not Iskander, maybe just artillery, like something like Krasnopol. A little bit in the northern direction we have a HIMARS system, and in this video we can see that the Russians, as a result of reconnaissance operation, managed to discover the position of HIMARS system that was attacking the Kursk area, and then the Russians were following after the HIMARS, and they discovered the position where the Ukrainians were trying to hide this multiple launch rocket system, and the Russians destroyed it as a result of Iskander strike. Another Iskander strike took place in the village of Kondratyevka. According to the Russians, they managed to discover the concentration of Ukrainian forces, and as a result of attack, this building was destroyed. As for the changes on the ground, we have small gains of Ukrainian forces in direction of Glushkova. According to information we have some geolocations. In this video we can see how the Russians were FPV droning the Ukrainian vehicles to the west of Byakhovo, which confirms additional Ukrainian gains. So based on this video we have adjusted the map, and we have colored the territory that used to be considered as a contested area. We're talking about this small cloud. We still haven't received anything from Apanasovka. Maybe there are still very heavy clashes, but the number of geolocations from this direction confirms that Ukrainians are regrouping in this this area and trying to concentrate as many as possible forces. The Russians are bombing this territory with FAB, trying to destroy the Ukrainian attack orders and not to allow them to move further in Glushkova direction. On the other hand, we stop receiving any updates from the Ukrainian side about any attempts to attack the village of Koreneva. Furthermore, we start receiving updates and changes on map in Russian favor. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to restore complete control according to different mappers over the southeastern part of Koreneva. Furthermore, the Russians managed to restore control over overly 60% of the village of Olgovka, and the Russians are pushing further. Furthermore, according to pro-Russian, pro-neutral mappers, the Russians restore control over these fields and over the village of Zhuravli. So for now, we're not going to adjust the map in someone's favor. We're going to mark these territories as a contested area, but as you can see, the Ukrainians stopped their offensive deep inside of the territory of Russian Federation. Now they began a fall back, retreating towards more reliable positions in the central part of the foothold. Now the Ukrainians are mainly concentrated just along the western flank, and they're making more attempts, and they're making just the only attempts to attack in this direction. So maybe this is the only thing they're going to do. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.